watch two horror stories on HD television.
Hello. Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to our provider case note training. I just want to start off by tell you who I am. I'm B.E.St. I am the service director for our CCS program. I see a number of faces that have been in some of our other trainings, and maybe as a place to start, we're a relatively small group, and so we'll start with the program staff, because there are a number of program staff here in addition to people who are providers. So we'll start with QA over here, quality assurance. Mitch.
Yep, Mitch Menigo, quality assurance specialist here at Oakland County.
Jesse Peckel, also quality assurance with CCS.
Amy B.E.St, quality assurance with CCS.
And Erin Libner, quality assurance.
And as providers, each of you have, each of the provider agencies is assigned to a particular quality assurance specialist who will be your kind of primary contact related to the work that you're doing in CCS. So we have a number of, we've hired a lot of staff. I mean, the program has really grown in size since inception. I'm not going to do a lot of time going through the history of our CCS program or CCS in the state of Wisconsin, but April of 16, we started with 4.5 staff members in CCS that were doing 1.0 of something else, and we've evolved over our 3 years or so in CCS, and today we're at 25 service facilitators, 6 mental health professionals. When we're fully staffed, we'll have 6 substance use professionals part of the CCS program, along with building the infrastructure. The quality assurance is an example of the infrastructure, the accounts payable, program support. So it really has gotten very big, and we got really big really fast. So I'll have our staff who are here. So maybe right here.
Janice Rowling, service facilitator for CCS, hired this past year in April.
Christy Hill, service facilitator, also hired in April.
Paige Dutter as service facilitator and also in April.
Nikki DeZiel, mental health professional, and hired in May.
Haley Bowman, service facilitator, just started in June.
Delisha Hanson, service facilitator, and started on April 8th.
Kylie Pettis, service facilitator, and I also started in April.
Cynthia Ken, substance use professional, and I started in May. Kenny Olsen, CCS service facilitator, started in May.
Mia Lohr, service facilitator, started in May as well.
Catherine Alton, service facilitator, and started in April. Brianna Bathke, with LSS, mentor, and relationship partners.
Let me just keep going so we know who the rest of.
Andrea Hess, mental health therapist, substance abuse counselor, Purveya.
I'm Paula Shuffler-Burkhardt. I'm a licensed professional counselor with Family Innovations and Aurora Community Counseling.
Kelly Green, peer specialist with Roundtable Revival.
Monica Lilly, and I work for Creative Wellness, doing management.
Deborah Wright, life and wellness coach with Creative Wellness.
I'm Trisha Lundeen, I'm an art therapist. New.
I'm Leanna Razor, and I'm a music therapist with Western Wisconsin Music and Medicine.
I'm Jeff Knudsen. I'm an addictions counselor at L.E. Phillips.
Ryan Sawyer, peer supporter for Milkweed Connections.
Jen Hartley, I'm an administrator with Milkweed Connections.
I'm Rhonda Eastman. I'm an addictions counselor at L.E. Phillips.
I'm Sarah Jones. I'm an RN at L.E. Phillips.
Jeannie Conner from Chippewa River Industries, supervisor.
I'm Ashley Higgins, employment specialist at Chippewa River Industries.
Lisa Piggott from LSS2.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for being willing to spend part of your day with us, and I want to say thank you for the work that you do within our CCS program, and supporting the participants that we are providing services to. You know, as I said, you know, we got big really fast. Today, our census is 227 participants. There's a number of people waiting to get into the CCS program. You know, what's our capacity, what's our ceiling, when are things gonna, you know, level out? I don't know that I know the answer to that question or those questions. You know, I think that, you know, we tripled the size from year 1 to year 2 and almost doubled again year 2 to year 3. And, you know, I think we're positioned to probably bring in a good 100 plus more participants into the program. And I think as a county, Oakland County has done a really good job in trying to make sure that we have the capacity to treat the people that are in need of services. So just some housekeeping issues. We are going to take a break at some point, right?
Yes, yes.
So we don't want anybody getting FBS, flat butt syndrome. So we'll take a break and we'll, but the bathrooms are out the door around the corner to the right. There's water, there's cookies. I think that this training is be helpful, that this is interactional, and so if you have questions, you know, feel free to ask them as we go along. We want this to be meaningful to everyone who's here, and that you get out of it what you need to. So we have a couple exercises that we're going to do during our afternoon together, and hopefully that'll help tie things together related to the importance of your documentation. You know, we all know if you've been around long enough, you know, if it's not documented, it didn't happen, and it's really important. Everyone knows that CCS is really a documentation-heavy kind of program, so we want to kind of help you guys get that right. So, if we want to just sort of roll through some, let's go to next one. Yeah, so the learning objectives for this afternoon, you know, understand the essential elements of CCS, of the progress note that, you know, we have a particular template that we can make available to providers if you are in need of such. But certainly as providers, you're able to use your own template to get your documentation in. There's essential elements that go to that documentation. The QA staff, the trainers will kind of provide information about that. Understand the importance of documentation. Telling your story. I mean, it's really important because for a lot of reasons. But when it comes time to, I mean, our work in CCS and your work in CCS, we're all one program, you know, is looked at and under the same lens. And people who come in, so the Division of Quality Assurance in the state of Wisconsin comes in every couple of years to review the program, and they know some of you, they know some of us, they don't know our participants, so it's really important that when you are writing your progress notes, that, you know, you're writing with sufficient detail, really, so someone who's completely unfamiliar with, you know, with what you're writing about has an understanding of what's happening, why you're doing what you're doing, telling your story, because they can't guess. And so it's really important that we provide as much detail as possible. I want to make sure, at least provide the opportunity, and we can do this as we go along, but I want to make sure that, you know, when you leave here this afternoon, that you have your questions answered. So if there are specific things, we got a little parking lot right here. If there are specific things you would like to make sure that we address or cover as part of our training, now would be a good time to kind of indicate that. Anything, those of you who have been providing services for a while, or those of you who are brand new and going to be starting to provide services. Everything.
This is gonna be easy. I don't have any questions.
Not yet.
I think once we get a little bit more into it, we'll probably have some questions, or have questions.
Yeah.
Sure, all right.
Okay.
TBD.
So we're going to do that. So let's go to the who, this is just sort of a slide that kind of, I guess, talks about differences between rehabilitation, and recovery. And I guess when I think about rehabilitation, I think about, more about doing 4, doing 2, helping someone adapt to their challenges in life, and recovery, which is one of the principles of CCS is. CCS is psychosocial rehabilitation. It's recovery. It's helping people get to a place where things are improving in their lives, where you have safety and stability as a foundation. We're really trying to help folks reach an optimal level of functioning. And so, when I think about rehabilitation, I think more about, doing with. I think that, as I mentioned, helping people achieve an optimal level of functioning. CCS is more relational, it's more interactional. It's helping people say, this is what's going well, this is what's not going so well. These are where there's opportunities for change. So, I think recovery is, hard recovery is a journey. It's a process, and I think that there's while it's important to be able to adapt to your circumstances, I think in order to move forward, to get better, have things go in a better direction, it's really about recovery. The who, what, where, and why is really kind of the stuff that quality assurance specialists are going to get into with you in this training. But it's important to, I mentioned about the audience. Some of you are familiar with B.E.St. Rod is our DQA auditor, and he audits a number of different programs, DHS 35 clinics, DHS 75 certified programs, other programming in the state. And so, again, it's emphasis on, when you document so as if someone completely unfamiliar with the situation can pick up what you're writing about and get as clear of understanding as they can about what you're writing about. What makes CCS different from other programs? I talked about that a little bit already. It's the interactional, it's the relational, it's the recovery. Those are all important parts. It doesn't, what we do collectively, recovery, it takes a village. We've all heard those kind of things before. CCS is also about medical necessity, and we have talked about that in other trainings. So in CCS, we don't just take, today I think we have about 50 or so providers that encompass probably 500 staff individually from our contracted side. I've already talked about how many we have on the provided side. And so that's a lot of people. And so we don't just take, let's say we have 5 services. We don't throw 5 services at people and say, let's see what works. We try to be, take into consideration each individual participant's condition, the things that they're experiencing, and help support them, how they want to be supported, and kind of build a service plan around what we think is going to be most effective in working. So, in a nutshell, doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, with a reasonable expectation that something good is going to come out of it. Again, trying to help people reach that optimal level of functioning. And it looks different for everybody. It's not cookie cutter. Everybody doesn't get the same, doesn't have the same service plan, doesn't get the same services. We have multiple providers in multiple service array areas. That's kind of medical necessity in a nutshell. We go to the next slide. It's just kind of a different way of saying the same thing. Is it indicated? Does it meet a need? Is it appropriate? Does it fit the person's situation? Is it efficacious? Is there a reasonable expectation something good's going to come out of it? Effective, efficient. We don't, we want to do the right thing for the people that we're serving. So that's kind of medical necessity in a nutshell. So before we move on, are there any questions that people have? Okay, we're gonna
Jessie Peckle, I'm one of the quality assurance specialists. So we're gonna go through a couple slides. The next couple slides are gonna talk about, the requirements that we need in all of your notes when you submit them for review. One thing to keep in mind is our backgrounds, we're not clinicians. We have different backgrounds. My background's in healthcare administration, Erin's business administration, Amy's in science, and Mitch's in political science. So we're not clinicians, we're not here to critique your notes or anything like that. We're just purely looking to make sure that those notes meet MA requirements when they're coming to us. So listed on the right there is all the information that we require on those notes that they're an MA requirement. So we need to have dates and location of services. It's also really important to make sure that that information that you're listing also matches your invoices. So we have accurate and matching information on those two documents when they're submitted. The service array and is the type of service that you're providing. If it's ISD, psychotherapy, that all needs to be listed as well. Let's see. So travel time is also something that we have listed on there as well. Some of you may travel to your participants to and from. If that's the case, that travel time that it takes you to get from your location to your participant, that is travel time that you need to document as well. That's without the participant in the vehicle with you. If the participant is with you in the vehicle, the expectation is that you're using that time to discuss the goal and work on a goal. So that would be actually documented as service delivery time instead of travel time. Let's see. It's important to make sure that you have individual and group services indicated as well. A group indicates 3 or more participants. Any less than that, it's individual services. On the participant recovery goal, it's really important to make sure when you get those recovery plans from those service facilitators that you're making sure that you're accurately putting those goals down in your notes. Those goals are coming from our participants specifically, so those are the words coming from their mouths. So that's important. Sometimes there's objectives on those recovery plans, but we really want the actual goal written on those notes. Let's see. The progress note narrative, that you just want to make sure that you're putting in there, you know, how is what the activity that you're working on related to the goal, and making sure that you hit those points so we can see the connection between there. And then making sure that you're also putting provider name, the signature, and those credentials on all of those notes as well.
I'm sorry, before you move on, for the group services, how many participants have to be present for?
3 or more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next slide here is just reiterating everything that we just went through. We do have a handout in your packets that also has this information on there. That handout in your packets is essentially our checklist as we're reviewing your notes. So we're going through and making sure X, Y, and Z is all of this stuff on this checklist included in this note. And if not, then you're gonna just, you know, we'll send you a little reminder and let you know that you may have missed something there. Let's see. So Eau Claire County's best practice is that all of them follow MA guidelines. This next slide here talks about some other things that need to be included. It's important to note that for a billable note, face-to-face time has to happen. So if you're communicating via email, via text, phone call with your participant, that is not a billable note. But if you do have an instance where your participant maybe called you, they have an appointment today at 2, but they called you at noon to reschedule. That information, we do want you to write a non-billable note, just letting us know so we have that continuing of care. We know, you know, in the process down the line that we're keeping track of making sure that they're meeting those goals of the times that they need to meet with you and what happened. You know, you haven't seen this participant in a month, what happened, and then we're seeing a log of those attempts.
Question. Yeah. So, say for example, I have a client, consumer, participant, and have a cancellation, and say they've had 2 or 3 cancellations or a vacation or something. Do I need each time, each week, I'm supposed to meet them, have to, or can I summarize it in a monthly?
Good question.
Hi, Erin.
I'm only here recently. I started in March, so I just wanna make sure I don't give you
She's
wrong
the dot
information.
your I, cross your T kind.
Sure, no worries. I'm gonna jump in a little bit on this one. This is a policy change really, or an update since we had our recertification survey in March of this year. The focus that we're trying to cover is that recovery plans outline when there's supposed to be a contact. And so if there's a cancellation, we need to have a record to show that it was planned and it wasn't just that we went for 3 or 4 weeks without meeting with that person. So there isn't a simple yes, no answer to your question. It's more of a, if you had a contact that was scheduled and it became unscheduled for whatever reason. They called you, they're sick, they called you, they've overbooked themselves, bad weather, you're sick, something like that. Capturing that so that it shows that we haven't just let them.
There's a record of those attempts.
Right.
So, for example, again, kind of clarification, make sure. So if I was supposed to see this consumer on the 14th, 17th, and on the 20th, sick, and then overbooked. Can I summarize that in one and notify the dates?
It would be best to do a separate one for each note.
That's what we're doing right now. As of right now, say for instance, we're gonna see her on the 17th. She called and canceled. Now there's a note on the 17th saying she canceled. We rescheduled for the 20th.
Yep.
So third time per, okay. I just wanted to be clarifying.
Yes. No, I really appreciate it. The reason that we're doing that is because it might shift from month to month. So when we're only getting a month's worth of billing at a time, which we're gonna cover in a little bit for those of you who aren't as familiar. But if it goes from like, maybe the last actual contact you had was on May 17th, and then they canceled the next 3 sessions in May. Now when we're reviewing May notes, I don't know what happened. If you wait until June 6th when you actually see them again to summarize everything, I don't know that when I'm reviewing May notes. So we're trying to make sure that we have something captured for every time there's supposed to be a contact.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And I'd like to jump in on that too. So
Sure.
that's the important piece of, I'm gonna come back on camera.
I thought it was better.
That's a really important piece of telling the story. You know, so every participant has a recovery plan. On that recovery plan, there are goals, there are objectives. So their goal might be, I wanna feel better. And the objective is what would need to happen in order for them to feel better, and then matching them with the service. And so they're in a plan that might prescribe or indicate that they receive a service so many times a week for such and such a period of time. And DQA is really, and I agree with what they're saying related to this, is so what's on the recovery plan needs to reflect what's happening needs to reflect what's on the recovery plan. So if you're supposed to see someone twice a week, you know, there should be something in the notes to reflect that happening. And if it doesn't happen, why didn't it happen? So if you go to the door, you knock on the door, you have an appointment, and they don't come to the door, or they're not feeling well, you know, you need to have, that indication, because you can't guess. And so if one possible, speculation might be that, they didn't get this, you said they needed this, they didn't get that, why didn't they get that? And so what's on the recovery plan and what happens needs to match. If there's a reason that something doesn't happen, because people cancel, people aren't always present when you're there, you need to indicate why that is. And so tell your story is really a really important story to tell.
Thanks, Faye. So another important piece is the attendees. So if you're senior participant, it's just junior participant there, but just listing that you're with the participant. But if they have somebody with them, a spouse, a friend, son, daughter, it's really important for us to know who those attendees are that are there present in the session. 3 important information pieces for that. So first name, last name, and relationship to the participant. So we require at least 2 out of those 3. So if you're not sure what her last name is, but you know that Betty's here and she's the neighbor, that information is fine. Just making sure that you include that in your note. The purpose of the activity, you want to make sure that you're listing how the activity that you're doing, if you're out in the community doing something with your participant, or if you're at home working on something, working on some skills, that you're tying that activity back to their goals and why it's related to their goal and how it's helping them. Responses from a participant of how that activity went. The preferable thing is that you're using quotes from the participant of how they reacted, how that goal helped them or didn't help, that activity help them or didn't help them. So that's the best way to do it, and preferable ways to make sure you're putting a quote from the participant to content in there. Goal progress or barriers, that's a really great thing to put into the narrative, again, tying it back, that activity and that goal and how that's working together. And then making sure that you have a plan for the next service, so an indication of the next service. Do you have something scheduled for next week? If you know the date and time or what you're going to be doing, that would be great. We need that included in there. If something's not scheduled yet because mom's got to figure out her work schedule first, just indicating that, saying that the plan is that mom's going to call me next week and let me know when she'd like to schedule the next follow-up. Okay. Any questions? All right.
Hey everyone, again, my name's Mitch, I'm also quality assurance. So the next slide is about recovery language, and there's a couple handouts for this. The first handout has a couple pages to it. It looks like this, and it's about recovery language versus deficit-based language. They also call it strength-based, person-first, trauma-informed. I know trauma-informed is definitely a phrase that is thrown around a lot nowadays, so that kind of language. So like Bill has mentioned, it's a recovery-based program, and our program standards are that even the narratives and the summaries of what's happening in sessions reflects the recovery-based nature of our program and the values of our program. So on this handout, you'll notice the left side mentions different phrases, wording that is more deficit-based or focused on the negatives in the person's recovery journey, and the right side is rephrasing those key words to fit the values of the program of the recovery-based language. So it's a helpful handout. We as QA, Aaron and I have been QA for the county for over a year now, and I'd say between the two of us, we've had maybe a handful at most of instances where people were not using recovery-based language. It really is not that common where you see kind of this deficit-based language, but just a good thing to be aware of and to be conscious of. The audience for these notes can really vary. It can be as narrow as you, us, but often includes auditors. It could include team members on the recovery team, participants themselves. So having language that really does focus on the positives, but still acknowledging barriers is really important for documentation. And do you have any questions off the bat about that handout or anything that will pop up? Next we've got an exercise. So the exercise is at your tables, and it involves this handout, a little paragraph about George. And the example narrative uses some deficit-based language. So amongst your table, just kind of look for those instances where the writer has used deficit-based language, and then have an example or two of better language that could be used that's focused on recovery.
Does anybody need a pen?
I know that, right.
Somebody else?
Like where it says that Nancy to use drugs when he was feeling suicidal, and then he says that, should say that.
Right. And there's very little on these little quotation points, but there is no more. And that's like, a field, like, two.
Oh, sorry. Guess it was my first one. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, we'll move into going through it a little bit here. So what did people find for some of the more negative language used in the original?
A lot. Let me tell you.
Taking you out for this one.
So very little was even in the participants' words, we've noted. Like, there was a lot of opinions being placed. The fact that they said that he's manipulating his family, maybe not put that in there. Personally, I think it should be like, if you observe certain things that are notable, to put that in there, but not put your personal opinion like that.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely could be rephrased. You could include stuff like the way he's interacting with his family, but
Right.
manipulate would be not, obviously.
It's very deficit based.
Right,
Yeah.
and like you said, it's very opinionated.
Yeah.
And what else do people find?
What if it's right on? Yes.
Like the first sentence, George is a person with borderline personality.
Right.
He's
Yep.
diagnosed.
Diagnosis. Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What else do people find? There's a lot of them.
The reference that he's attention seeking, that's pretty negative language.
Yeah. Well, how could that better be rephrased?
He's looking for resources.
Resources, recognition, something along those lines would definitely be more appropriate.
So when he talks about, or the person who's writing this, talks about he's in denial, it could be rephrased to, you know, he's guarded, or he's in a pre-contemplative stage of, you know, whatever, instead of things in that.
Or he disagrees with the fact that he's being categorized as that. Any other keywords they looked on?
It says he has a tendency to use drugs when he's feeling suicidal. Is he stating that, or you stating that? Is that your personal judgment?
Yeah, so I mean, I got a cheat sheet and that wasn't highlighted, but that's one where there's a lot of it in this note where it's kind of your personal opinion of whether that's focusing on the negatives, that writer might not have felt that way, that was, he was kind of being, or she was being, you know, upfront about that. I wouldn't necessarily, you know, peg that as deficit-based, but it definitely could be construed as that. There's probably better ways to phrase that. It would be probably helpful to indicate whether that's the opinion from the writer themselves, or if that's kind of being, you know, decided amongst the group, among the recovery team.
What about the fact that they're referring to him as George, or they say client or patient or something in your progress note?
It's totally fine to indicate by first name of the participant. It's totally fine. Yeah, we are totally fine with George, participant, full name of the participant, George, last name. Those are all totally acceptable.
Is it acceptable to put things in quotations like it has here?
Yeah, so those are coming directly from the participant, so those are the quotes. We just get used to seeing those quotes and assuming that it's the participant, so that's usually how it, and you know, if it was coming from, I think this note does a good job of indicating that it's coming from the participant, you know, saying he describes the mother as. There are definitely notes where there could be some vagueness around that, and you would really want to indicate, you know, if the mother is saying something in this session, really indicating that's coming from her. Yeah. Anything else to about people?
The resistant part, he's resistant to the possibility of a chemical dependency evaluation.
Yeah, definitely. How would you better phrase that one? Yeah, that would be good.
Yes, reservations.
Sure. Anything else? Just a couple more. Anyone else wants?
Instead of hopeless about his family relationships, he could be lacking trust in his family and needs supports to develop those relationships.
Yeah, or even just, I mean, even the phrase, you know, is coming from the writer. He is hopeless. That's the writer kind of projecting that. If that's truly how he feels, if that was a quote from him, or you know, if he feels like he's not able to change his family, that kind of rephrasing to show that that's coming from the participant, that that's their current state. It's good to acknowledge that. That's not deficit-based in itself as a sentence, but the fact that it's being projected, I think, is the key point here.
Well, I think that you can say that, but then give examples. Like, I think it's okay to say, like, it appears that John is feeling hopeless, and here are the reasons why.
Right.
You know, it's like back up that claim.
Because hopelessness is something that's very, very necessary, especially when we're trying to get people money from insurance companies. Hopeless is one of the words we need to put in there.
Sure, yeah. And
Just but you can reframe how it is.
Reframing it is the key thing here.
I like
yeah.
the example part.
Yeah, definitely. It's just really reframing it and, you know, showing that that might be his view of his state of affairs there. It's not the writer projecting that or making assumptions about this. You know, if that's truly how he feels, quoting him, giving some frame of reference there. Cool. I mean, there's plenty more that could be out of this. A lot of it comes down to just kind of your personal opinion on what is, you know, more recovery focused and what's deficit. Everyone has their own tone that they use in the writing, and when we would kind of bring it up is if it's very clear, you know, you use these phrases. This one in this example is very clear: attention seeking, hopeless, is borderline. Those kind of phrases are going to jump out to us. We're going to say, hey, could you please adjust it and use the recovery pace? We're not going to just say denied. You know, we're going to ask you to work with us and update the language, just because it is a broader audience. It's not just you sending notes to us and, you know, we review it and pay. There's all kinds of different people that could be looking at it, so we want to make sure it reflects their recovery journey, it reflects the values of our program, because you're a part of our program and all the documentation is, you know, seen by everyone. So just being cognizant of that, and if you ever have any questions about language, reach out to us, reach out to a service facilitator, someone on the team. If you have any questions, we are more than willing to be a resource. Any questions about recovery-based language before we move on? Cool. So, jumping back into our documentation standards, I kind of talked about phrases that jump out to us. That's a lot of kind of our review. We do currently review 100% of the notes that you guys send in, and we're comparing those notes to the invoice to kind of line up, make sure the time indicated on the progress note matches the time billed on the invoice, and looking at the content and pretty much looking at everything to make sure it lines up, because our program is reimbursable, so we want to make sure that documentation is accurate and it meets all standards. So some examples are up there on stuff that really stands out to us. If you have a 2-sentence note, but you're billing 30 minutes, 45 minutes of documentation time, we're not going to make assumptions. There might be more documentation time. You might have a separate report out there. So we're going to just say, hey, you have this high documentation time. Can you please provide more information to show us why? Sometimes it might have been a mistake, and it really, should have been, 5 minutes, 10 minutes documentation time. So we'll probably just question it again. We don't just straight deny stuff. We're going to ask questions about it. We're going to figure out what's going on with it. High amounts of travel time. So this one, we also have you indicate the miles traveled. So an easy example would be if you put down that you traveled 10 miles, but you're billing an hour of travel time. We're gonna wonder what's going on. A lot of times in the winter, we see long, construction. We have a lot of that around here. That definitely adds time to my commute. So it happens. And then, yeah.
Do you want us to describe why, if there was construction or?
Yeah, definitely. That's what, if we reach out to you regarding that, you would expect either you adjust the time to reflect the actual mileage, or you do offer an explanation, and we'll add that into the documentation. So yeah, if it was construction, a lot of times in the winter we'll see, it takes sometimes twice as much time to get places because of the icy roads or snow. So we understand it's Wisconsin. So we need to have that documented. We need to have a reason for why there's time. It's the same as the documentation. We're just looking to get something in there so that when we, are paying for that, it matches. Units of service provided seat authorization. So we send out authorization reports with authorization numbers and units, and the facilitators are the ones that create those authorizations. So they're working with you to understand how many times a month, a week, you're meeting with the participant, the type of service. All that is coming from the service facilitators for the most part, and those authorizations are then entered into our system, and that's kind of the available pool that we have to pay invoices. So if you are authorized for 1 hour a week for a meeting with the participant, and all of a sudden you started meeting with them 2 hours a week, and the authorization wasn't updated, you're gonna run out of units in our system, and we're not gonna be able to pay it without reaching out to someone. So if you do have a change in your services and you are using more units, and the facilitator hasn't indicated that they've updated, or we reach the point where you're out of units, we'll have conversations with the facilitator, and that's usually an easy fix. It's more of when a provider goes over and doesn't notify the facilitators. They might have an authorization that's really clearly tailored to that one session per week at this many minutes, and if you go outside of that parameter, then we have to adjust authorizations. And if it wasn't approved by a facilitator, or facilitator wasn't notified, then we kind of get into some bigger issues. Any questions about that specifically? I know that's something that we're looking at more as we've kind of gotten better capacity, and starting to be more aware of authorizations that are out there. Observation versus interaction for the narrative. So if your note just says kind of what happened in the session, it's not including the participant voice, and that's a really big factor in our notes. We really wanna see how did the participant respond to the service. You know, that's why we're sending them to providers, is to get those services and have progress, or attempt to have progress towards the recovery goals. So we really wanna see that captured in the notes. That's why we ask for quotes or paraphrasing from the participant regarding services and how they're responding to services. So if you're just saying, met with them, we went to a park, threw a ball, were there for an hour, left, took the participant home, that's not enough. We wanna see, you know, how did they respond? Was there an interaction with another kid at the park? Did that go well? Did you prompt them to do something? Was there an episode where they misbehaved and you had to redirect, something like that? We wanna see those kind of things in the note, because, you know, our staff will look at those to kind of see how they're responding to services and how that, you know, they're capturing the progress along their recovery journey, and it's really important to have that information captured. Recreational, so if you took them to the park and you threw the ball around and it can't be tied to the recovery goal, then we're gonna ask for more documentation. You know, we wanna make sure that the services are medically necessary, that they're appropriate, that they're in line with the recovery plan and what the team has written into the recovery plan as appropriate services and frequency. So we're gonna be looking for that when we look at notes as well. Were you going to the park because the participant has issues with anxiety and there were a lot of people around and they were learning coping skills? We were helping them cope with their anxiety during that time. A lot of people around, you know, having that information is super important and really relevant for documentation. And that is in line with the psychosocial rehabilitation guidelines. That's kind of our criteria for questions and stuff like that. So, kind of what do red flags mean for us? Red flags mean that we work on the notes for a little bit longer. You know, there's probably gonna be a string of emails that happen. You know, we're gonna be talking to you, to facilitators, to mental health professionals. So it just takes longer to process things when we kind of find these red flags. So, you know, communicating with our staff is really helpful and kind of avoids that, and it also makes it so that your documentation and invoicing gets processed as quickly as possible as other people. If we're spending a lot of time, you know, with provider A working on their notes, then provider B's notes kind of get slowed down because of that. So just working to avoid, you know, issues with documentation, being clear with our guidelines. We're trying to, you know, have an open dialogue with providers to make sure that we can process your notes, we can get your invoices paid as timely as possible. So it just helps kind of both of us if we can help avoid these red flags, things that we are gonna question or ask you about. And we'll offer, you know, guidance regarding future notes as well. There's been a lot of instances where it is kind of a small-ish issue, so we can kind of pay the note, let it stand as it is, and we'll expect that on future notes. There are some things that, you know, if you didn't include, if your time doesn't match up between the progress note and the invoice, we're gonna have to figure out which one's accurate. The invoice needs to be changed, the progress note, that kind of stuff will hold up that, but there's little things that we can kind of work towards correcting on future notes. Yeah, so the quality assurance review, like I said, right now we're reviewing 100% of the notes. We're just trying to be as accurate as possible and capture as much information as possible. So definitely helps that there's 4 of us now. So as we grow, our capacity has definitely grown. So I think our timeliness has also improved quite a bit as we have come on fully. And progress notes and billing. So like I said, progress notes capture the participant's progress. You know, their recovery goals, we're working towards those goals, and getting that captured is really important. Service arrays, you know, there are service array definitions. Forward Health has created those definitions. So just making sure that the activities, the services that happen during sessions meet the criteria of the service arrays that were assigned or authorized by the facilitator. The nice thing about the service arrays is that they're fairly broad. Individual skill development is a pretty common one, and that one in enhancement. That one, is an umbrella. They're working on improving their life skills. There's a lot that can go under that. Wellness management, there's a lot that, there are some criteria. Like I said, there's a forward health memo if you want to really dive into it, but if we ever find an issue where it doesn't quite fit that service array, we'll just let you know and we'll work with you to adjust the language, to work with the facilitator to make sure that services are kind of what they anticipated for that, and even potentially change the service rate for future notes if something has changed. And like I said, supporting billing for services and service times. We've got that's our two key things: are the invoice and the progress notes, and they both support each other. We pay off of the invoice, but the progress note needs to be there as well, and that's kind of the document that is really helpful for us. Tips, just some quick tips. Avoid using abbreviations and acronyms. A lot of acronyms in the social work field. We don't know all of them, we're learning a lot of them, but making sure that you're, again, speaking to the audience, and if it's not something that's really common, defining it at least in the notes. Just avoiding it and just being as clear as possible, not using initials, using a first name, using a first and last name if it's not clear who this person is, identifying people in the note, and their relationship to the team, to the participant. It's all just really helpful because when the auditor comes, they're not looking at months of stuff. They're sometimes pulling individual sessions and trying to understand what's happening in that individual session. So they like to say that each note kind of has to stand alone. You need to understand kind of how it fits into the goal, why it was authorized, how the services are appropriate, what's happening. When we include the list of attendees, why are they there, how are they related, that kind of stuff is really important as a standalone note. Formatting template needs to be readable. We have a template. You obviously, like Bill said, you don't have to use it. It's helpful for us if you use it, or at least incorporate all the elements of it into your company template. That's changed over the years. With each audit, they seem to find something new to change, so anytime those recommendations come to us, we update our templates. We make sure that our templates match the standards that we're being told, and what we've interpreted as well. That's the fun thing about CCS is every county, every consortium is different, so we're mostly going off of what the auditors told us, what we can see in statute. Some of it's very clear, some of it's up for interpretation, so just making sure that we are capturing all the information that meets all the policies that we've been told. Again, just worth repeating, use the participant voice language. It's them kind of leading the ship, and it's their recovery. So as much as we can have their voice present within the notes, understanding where they're at during that session, how they're responding to services is so important, and it's the core of the program. Asking questions, like I said, quality assurance is open. We get questions all the time. Sometimes they're easier to answer than other times. So, but we're willing to bring it to program staff. We'll go to the facilitator. There are a lot of times for a facilitator, you can reach out directly to facilitators and get a question answered, but more general questions about billing, about something in documentation, definitely shoot one of us an email. Your company will kind of know which quality assurance specialist is working with your individual provider, so you should be able to figure it out. We've got business cards as well, though. If you reach out to any of us can field a question. We'll even consult each other probably if it's a tricky one. We'll talk to Bill, we'll talk to other people in the program. Yeah, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We are glad to answer any and all questions. I'm done now.
I have a quick little question for you.
Definitely.
So, as a nurse, my situation with interacting with the patients is different. Like, I meet with them for an hour on this day. It's like they come up for medications. We do education with them of the medications and that sort of thing. It's pretty short.
Yeah.
It's not scheduled. It's just when throughout the day, so multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they have questions, concerns about things going on, so we spend time finding out what's going on, assessing them, and then we may have to go like speak with the doctor, contact the doctor, whatever, or take it with the treatment team, see how we're gonna manage the situation, or whether we'll get a plan together for them or whatever. Like, is that stuff you want like documented too as we go along, or like say once we manage whatever's going on, then put a note in, or yes, we haven't been instructed. We just basically document our interaction during the medication administration, and that's it right now.
So, you're kind of talking about, I mean, sometimes, you know, you're talking with people about the importance of taking their medications, and they're not always wanting to take their medication when you're wanting to.
Or like concerns about or adjustments in them, or they may want to change a medication, or anything like that we might need to speak with the doctor, that we can't just resolve in that conversation there. That might take some follow-up. And
I think that there's other pieces to that equation. You know, let's say you're not able to do what you need to do or resolve what needs to be resolved at that immediate level, and you have to go to a different place to do it, then, you know, I think that is important information to share. You know, the part thing I always start talking about is that, you know, sometimes it's time for a participant to take their medication regardless of the setting that they're in, and they're not wanting to take their medication, and, you know, it might be a stop-start. We don't need to, you can combine that information into that one particular note, instead of saying, you know, I tried, so I tried, and then 15 minutes later I tried. I mean, you can.
right, because that is probably pretty unlikely to have like every step.
No, that piece is not. I mean, I think you can combine that information, but like, you know, if there's some question about, you know, the appropriateness of the medication of the participant. I mean, if you have to like talk to the doctor about a change, or you know, I think you probably want to have that information in there. That's making sense, or answering your question.
Yeah, when we kind of see like an individual session, we probably want, you know, as much as possible, you know, if they came in and they had a question about medication and you were able to have some answer or partial answer or no answer, and then you went and asked, right, and it moved along the line, just kind of tying that back to the original session, if that's possible, or at least getting that documentation to make people aware of that kind of strain.
That's kind of okay to just include it.
Yeah, you know, and I don't know how frequently it happens in a setting like Ellie Phillips, but I mean, I'm thinking of people who are in the CBRS settings, like in the group homes, you know, trying to support people in taking their medications as prescribed. You know,
we have more of not people like wanting changes in medication, or looking for more or additional or something different, or this isn't working. We don't really have any problem with like non-compliance or that, or people not wanting to take it. It's more changes, adding or trying something different.
I need, or I want something different than what's prescribed, or
right.
They're in the beginning stages, or some of it's just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's what comes into there, and they're scared too. But it does happen a lot, because they always want to change because they just stopped doing the behavior. They have a feeling that they don't know about.
Right.
And so we're in a really fast-paced situation.
Yep.
That you know, we can't take, you know, you have 30 people there at a time, and so we're moving quickly, but I understand what Sarah's saying in her note. All you have to do is say this, contacted doctor, this took this amount of time, this is the resolution of it, blah, 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 and then here's the time we put in.
Cause we might have to make like several different contacts with different, you know, counselor or the doctor, or get back, or different things
Yeah,
like
because at the
that.
end of the day, you wanna make sure that you're doing the right thing, and that you're,
But is that billable if it's consult and not face to face?
well,
It should be documented, it's not necessarily billed for the entire time. The MA standard is face-to-face services are billable expenses. The time spent talking with other people without the person there is typically not billable time,
What about
but it
if
should be captured.
If you changed it as your representative for your person? Cause that's what you're doing, is you're representing the patient or
I mean, it's
patients.
fairly clear about the face-to-face aspect of CCS and billable time. We still want captured for documentation's sake, but, really the only CCS billable time is when you're face-to-face with a participant, or that, the travel time, like Jesse mentioned, where you're not with the participant, but you're traveling to the participant, or you drop the participant off and you're traveling back to the office or back home. Those are the billable criteria for the CCS program.
you're still wanting to tell the story though. And
Right.
I think that there's importance in telling that story, and so as a nurse, I mean, or anybody, I mean, are there other people like in the Ellie Phillips setting that might support someone in taking their medication that's prescribed? I mean, so it's time to take the medication, is typically administered by the nurse?
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the non-prescriber medication support that goes into that. The work that the doctor does around the, prescriber, that would be, meeting with the participant, prescribing a particular medication. You're documenting and billing for that direct work that's being done to help support them in taking their medication. But there may also be other conversations that need to be had,
And either way, typically, we would put in a note on anybody like that, like this was going on and we did that. I just didn't know if we needed to be documenting it a little differently for you guys, or.
yeah, I'd say whatever you can do to best tell the story of what you're doing. I mean, some of it will be billable, some of it may not be billable, and,
And a lot of the non-billable time is built in as indirect time in your rate. There's a certain number of that goes into the rate tool, so consults might be reflected in your rate, so.
Yeah, and I don't even know how much.
and that's happening at a completely different level,
Right.
and so.
But still documenting it,
That's
but
the
knowing
problem.
that, the time should really reflect the time face to face, but still documenting the other interactions that are going on as part of this participant's.
Do you guys get all of our notes on that person, or only the ones that we put like in their avatar number and?
For Ellie Phillips.
We're not getting notes that say we're talking to the doctor. The notes for specifically from the RNs are,
Okay.
we gave them their meds, there were no questions.
Yeah.
So we aren't getting those other pieces
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
But we might at some point.
We might have some.
We might turn them down.
No, definitely not.
Right.
Well, cause on a regular note, we wouldn't put the number that would, the avatar number, so they probably aren't, if they don't have that on there, they probably aren't giving it to you. I mean, we could. I'm the first nurse to go through this training, so, at our facility, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions related to what I was talking about?
How about we take a break?
So we're gonna get back started, to kind of transition us back into talking about progress notes and billing, is I wanted to ask you a question. We've talked a lot about how progress notes let us know what's going on, and also how they go along with the billing in order to get your agency paid. Can anybody think of any other reasons of progress notes being important?
They show progress.
Absolutely, absolutely. They communicate what's going on.
Yeah.
Participate. Anybody else?
Just telling the story.
Tell them the story, absolutely. They can also be used for developing future recovery goals. This is a recovery program, so the whole idea is that your participants are making progress, and as progress happens, their goals can change. Sometimes they'll morph into, I just wanna feel better, to I wanna learn how to do some more things that I didn't previously know how to do. And now that I'm feeling better, I can. So it helps us with developing future recovery goals as well. It also helps pay for staff wages. I mean, there's some agencies that might not be able to have as many staff that they do if we weren't in this relationship for the program. So everything that we can do with progress notes and have that good relationship and the communication flow helps us all out. And we don't like to think about necessarily the focus of the program to be getting everybody paid, but that is a reality of the program. We know recovery for our participants is utmost the most important thing, but payment is probably number 2 for everybody, is to make sure that the agencies and the providers are getting paid, as well as staff, as well as us. So for those of you who aren't familiar with how the MA billing works, you guys provide the service as the agencies, you bill the county pays your providing agencies, and then the county will submit all of those charges to medical assistants to get reimbursed from the state. So there's a lot of money moving around, and so we have this opportunity to make sure everybody gets paid timely and working together for it. So some reasons that we can have some payment delays are if there's information mismatch between progress notes and invoices. Mitch covered on that a little bit when he was talking about the authorized units. Definitely if we're running out of those, there's gonna be a problem. But one of the other issues that we can have is if the service array doesn't match. The recovery plan is listing a specific service array that the team came up with at a meeting. That recovery plan, you should all have, and then the service facilitator will put in an authorization. Sometimes those don't match, under no fault of any of yours, because you guys don't do that piece of it, but that is a delay for us. So if you notice something that your authorization says you're set to do one thing, but you know you're listed in the recovery plan for something else, for sure ask about it. Ask that service facilitator and say, well, this is what I thought we were doing. Can I clarify? If you guys can help us clarify that at the forefront, then we don't have to hold payment at the end because now the system doesn't match. So again, not any fault of yours, but it does cause us some delays on the other end to be able to process things. Again, we need to have matching information. If it doesn't match, we don't necessarily know which piece is wrong. So for example, the data service. If your invoice says the data service is 618 and the progress note says 617, we don't know which one's right. There's not gonna be anything in the content that specifically says Monday versus Tuesday. So those are reasons that even though they're teeny tiny, we can't pick it because we don't know. So we are gonna have to rely on you guys to make those updates for us. Same thing with time and service. The direct time plus the documentation time gets billed together. That travel piece is a little bit separate, but anything that doesn't match, we are gonna have to have some clarification help from you. The staff providing the service is authorizations and rates for services are all tied to education level. So that's the staff type. So for example, somebody who's providing mentoring services at LSS, I'm gonna pick on them just because I review their notes. They're more than likely gonna be a bachelor's level staff person or a recovery rehabilitation worker. That's gonna be somebody with a high school education or somebody with a bachelor's degree. That individual who's providing services at a high school level education or an associate's level education gets paid differently than an individual who's at a bachelor's level. Authorizations are specifically tied to that level. So anytime there's a mismatch and an authorization is for somebody at a bachelor's level, but somebody at a rehabilitation level does the work, now we have another pause. We have to stop and figure out where the miscommunication was and fix it. Probably something the service facilitator is going to have to fix, but anytime that stuff doesn't line up ahead of time, anytime you guys can help is great to help us keep things moving. The location of service, if that's incorrect or a mismatch between the invoice and the progress note, we're probably gonna have to ask about that too. Sometimes we can tell. If your location at the beginning of your progress note lists 99 other, but the narrative says, we met at home and nothing says you left, we know it's home. But the note still has to say it. And so we will ask you to make those updates as well. Same thing with service array type. Again, those authorizations and the recovery plan listing those services. When they don't match, we'll have to have a pause and figure out what's going on. The travel time also we have that as a separate note. In your packets, you should have a sample of our invoice. You definitely don't have to use our invoice, but we created it as a template to help and make things a little bit easier for you as a provider. And when you use our invoice template, there is a separate column for service time from travel time. And the reason we have it separated that way is not so you can put it all in the same line together. Unfortunately, that would be convenient. But we have to have them listed separately because there's a separate authorization for travel than there is from the actual service. So every time you go somewhere to provide a service, you're gonna bill a line for the actual service, whether it's psychotherapy, whether it's ISTE, whatever you're doing, we'll have one line. And then you'll have a second line for travel if you travel to get there. So services we often see in pairs. And so mismatches on those, again, cause us some delays, but using our templates will hopefully help make your life a little bit easier. If you have questions about them ever, please feel free to reach out and ask. Continuation on them. If the degree listed on documentation is inconsistent with the records we've received, maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Your providing agencies have given us information when you started or when the relationship began about what everybody is credentialed to do. So, for example, Jeff, I've got some information about you.
What do you do?
So I know, all good, I promise, all good. But so we know when Jeff billing comes in, what his level, what we expect to see and what the established rate will be, and we know all that information ahead of time. But things change. Sometimes people go back to school. Sometimes they go from an in-training license to a fully fledged LPC or LMFT. When those things happen, there's a level change. And if we don't know there's a level change, but all of a sudden we get billing with a new level on it, now we have another problem. Because now the authorization doesn't match the services that we have indicated for what the individual can bill at doesn't match either, so we have to stop again and go back to the agency and say, okay, this is what we have Jeff listed at, this is what you're billing him at, what's up? Well, we had an update. Okay, well now we need copies of stuff. So if we know about that stuff ahead of time, then we don't have to stop the process. We can keep the process moving. Anytime we can get that information before submitting billing, makes things move a lot faster. And if we don't receive items, that's also gonna be a delay. For example, training logs, you guys have to do training in order to be able to perform CCS services. At the very beginning, you have 20 hours or 40 hours based on your level of experience in psychosocial rehabilitation. So we need one of those within your first 3 months of providing services, and then we have an annual one for everybody to do 8 hours of training. That can come, sometime in the window of starting working with participants, but that background check has to be on file before services can begin, before services can be paid for. So if we get a billing and it's somebody that we don't know as a staff member, everything stops. We can't do anything processing that invoice until we get some background information from the agency. And anybody who's had a background check, which should be everybody, knows that they take a little bit of time. It's not usually something that comes back within 10 minutes that we can, get right back to business. There's usually some time and some delays with that. We talked about authorization levels. Authorizations being tied to specific education levels too. So we're good on that. And with the billing requirements, again, I feel a little bit like we're beating a dead horse, but it's really, really, really important. This is what we spend a lot of our time communicating about and pausing service processing about, is things not matching and making sure we have everything set up. So the invoice and the progress note should all have matching date of service, time of service, staff providing the service, location, service rate type. As far as the staff level, don't forget that the staff level on the invoice is not their credential. The staff level is going to be an MA code, so somebody who has a master's degree, their MA billing code is HO. I don't know why, that's all set up by MA, but that's important information for us to have on the invoice, because not everybody who has a master's degree is considered an HO if they're going for a license. If they're a LPC in training, they've got a different code. Even though they still have that master's degree, they're a different code. So I know that's very specific to invoices and billing that not everybody is necessarily a part of, but that's also information that kind of slows us down, because our billing folks can't enter if they don't know what the staff time is. So it's important to include that. Credentials, on the other hand, are going to be your bachelor's, your MSWs, your LPC, anything like that should be in your credentials and your signature on your progress note. Any questions about the billing requirements so far?
Will team meetings always be at the same service provider, or will they ever have their own?
That is a really good question. Did everybody hear her? She asked if recovery team meetings would always be billed at the service, the authorization, or if they'll be coded as a different service, for example, service planning. That's a question that actually came up earlier this year from, I think, another county or another consortium has changed their system a little bit. We don't plan to change our system. If you are authorized to provide psychotherapy, substance use treatment, ISTE, whatever service you are authorized to do, that is also the service that you should be billing when you do a recovery team meeting. It's a good question, thank you. The reason we're doing that is because it helps us capture what services are actually being provided. If everybody changed to service planning, it kind of muddies what services are actually being provided because it takes away some of that time.
But if we get any direction from the state directly to change that, then obviously we'll update our templates and stuff, and we'll
tell you
everyone.
We'll let you know.
But as of yet, we haven't gotten that direction from the state, so we'll continue to have it build whatever authorization you have for service raise.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier too because it's less, right now, it's less authorizations for you to keep track of. Because everything falls under your service and your travel. So you don't have to keep track of a second service as well.
Another quick question, when you're saying that progress notes need to match all the billing, do you want like when you saw them, like I saw them from 9 until 9:45 in the progress note, or just the date and then you just have your narrative of the visit?
Sure, if you wanna include that, please feel free to. It is not a requirement to include a specific time. I know some agencies like to do that, or it's part of their policy or their internal process. Totally fine, but it's not a requirement from us. Okay.
What about place to place for, like, say, for travel? Sure. I started in, we're in Eau Claire, but say, for example, Eau Claire and my person moved to Mondovi. So is that required, like I drove from Eau Claire to Mondovi?
That's a really good question too. We recently learned that there's some communication from another consortium to some agencies about that, and we are clarifying one piece before we're ready to let the group know about that. So communication will be coming if there's gonna be a change.
Okay.
For right now, feel free to include it if you want to, but at this moment at 2:45 on Tuesday afternoon, it is not a requirement yet.
Okay.
But we'll let you know if that changes.
That was in the rumbles.
That's a good question. It's helpful information to include, especially if we know, like, there's a lot of travel and we don't necessarily know where you start. I mean, if you're starting at your office and you're going to the participant's home, cool, we can Google it to see how far apart they are. But if you're starting from somebody else's home, we definitely don't expect you to put that in progress notes. There's huge HIPAA concerns with including other participants' names or anything like that. So definitely don't do that. But we'll keep you informed.
It might be difficult, like I started in Eau Claire and ended up in Eau Claire. You can't use the participant,
right.
Kind of thing. So it'll be interesting how that looks, so.
I think if you're doing something that's further, like you started in Eau Claire and you ended up in Fairtrade, I think we'll figure it out. When we see an hour's worth of travel, like but you're going, 50 miles or something like that, we'll see it. But those questions, something like Eau Claire, there's 80 miles listed, then there might be a question.
Another question regarding that then, if you're going from one participant to another, how do you bill that travel time? Like obviously you're gonna bill your travel time to the first participant, but then from traveling from the first to the second, who do you bill that travel time to? The person you're going to or the person you're going from?
Sure, yep, it'll be the person you're going to.
Okay.
Yep, so it's where you're starting to get to your destination. So in that particular situation, let's say you're seeing those two people and then you're going back to the office. The first individual is only gonna get that first piece of travel from your origin to their home or wherever you're meeting them. And then that second person will get the travel from the first participant to the second participant, but then they're also gonna get their house back to your office. So it depends on the day and how your route goes. Yeah, good question too though. So back to billing requirements. Every progress note must have a signature. We will send it back and ask for a signature if there isn't one there. A lot of agencies who use their own electronic medical records system have an electronic signature, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Usually it's gonna be stamped with a date and a time. And I'm looking at both of you because I know your agencies both do that. So it won't necessarily be like an actual signature. But if you wanted to sign something and like scan it in and attach it to your progress note so that you don't have to print out and sign every single note, that's okay too. That's okay too. It just has to look like a signature. You can't just type your name, Aaron Libner, on the bottom of a progress note, or my name. Don't do that either. But that isn't gonna work. You actually need some sort of signature or indication of an electronic signature. As far as travel on the progress, or on that invoice, excuse me, we need to pick the location for every service that is happening. The exception is gonna be travel. It's always going to be 99, which is other. And that's a change that actually happened last year after a recertification. And the reason for that is because we know you're going to somebody's house based on the fact that you billed for their house. You billed for their session to happen in their home. You can't travel in their home. You travel to it. So the time that you're spending in your car to get from your origin to that individual's home, you're not there yet. So you're actually in another location because you're moving, you're not stagnant. So we haven't had any, as far as I know, many issues with that lately. But it's just a reminder that the location for travel should always be 99. And then invoices and progress notes should be sorted by participant, kind of in a packet, and then when they're submitted to QA. So people who do their own billing are gonna be aware of this, maybe not folks who work at larger agencies. But what we typically expect to get every month is gonna be a packet of information where the first page is gonna be the invoice for John Doe, and then the following documents should be the progress notes that go along with this billing. And so then I will have one packet of an invoice and 4 or 5 or whatever progress notes for John Doe, and then he's done. And then I'm gonna have another packet for Jane Doe, and another packet for Susie Smith. And so they come as grouped things. We are doing all of our communication for progress notes currently through email. I should not have split up my packet, sorry. We're doing everything through email right now, so that is a little bit more challenging, whereas it's not like they're stapled together packets. So submitting information as a bunch of invoices in Excel and a bunch of progress notes in Word is totally fine. If you want to convert them into PDFs to make them actual packets together so everybody has their own stuff, that's even better. If it's already in a PDF, we can actually upload it straight into our system now. So if you would like to do that, that would be great for us, but it is not a requirement. And then we are asking that the monthly packets are submitted to your individual quality assurance specialist by the 10th business day, or I'm sorry, not the 10th business day, the 10th of the month following the services. So May services should have been submitted by June 10th. And June services should be submitted by July 10th, etc. And the deadline, this is something that we have not had to enforce yet, but there is language in our contract that says if invoices are not submitted within 30 days of the month ending, there's a chance they might not be paid, because it does impact our ability to bill medical assistance. If we can't pay medical assistance, or can't get reimbursed for medical assistance based on a timeliness problem, we're not gonna be able to pay the provider in a timeliness fashion as well. So we haven't had to enforce that yet, but we've had a lot of conversations with providers, especially as we've grown to become a team of 4 and our timeliness has improved substantially. Yes. I think that may become something that we need to discuss with certain providers in the future. I think another important piece to note is when we do send out edit requests, there is an expectation that they would be corrected and returned to us within 5 business days.
How soon after we submit the billing and there might be a few red flags, can we anticipate you getting back to us?
Sure. We have a schedule, if you will, of a goal schedule of being able to pay the provider by the last Friday of the month, following the month of services. So let me use actual dates because that sounded a little fuzzy. May services would be due to us by June 10th. If everything is smooth and we don't have any red flags or any communications that we have to have, by the last Friday of June is our goal to be able to pay every provider. So if there's a communication between there for problems or corrections that we might need, that should definitely be before then. And then if those corrections are submitted within this time frame and we can get those processed into, they'll be included. Otherwise, they might just be on a different check a couple weeks later.
Another thing to note is that our current process is that we process in the order that we receive.
Yep.
So if we have a provider that submits on June 8th, and then the next one comes in June 9th, and then June 10th, we would kind of go in that process, just to be respectful of, using, that as kind of our general guideline. So there's not necessarily a time frame that we'll be getting back to you. You can kind of use that last pay period of the month as kind of a, check in with us if for some reason you haven't heard from us. You should be getting payments if you haven't heard from us, because that usually means that we didn't have any requests. But still, it's worth checking in. We can give you an update, and let you know where we're at. In the past, we've had issues where that's really slowed down the processing, but now that we're up to speed, we should have fewer of those instances. But again, if you reach out to us, we should be able to get back to at least let you know where we're at with that processing.
We will never tell you not to ask a question. We are very easy to communicate with. I think it's important to note that we are, like Jesse mentioned earlier, we're not service facilitators, we're not clinicians. We aren't going out in the community to meet with participants. We are here 40 hours a week with the exception of like holidays and vacations and stuff like that. But we're here. We don't spend time going out to places. So we're always here working on progress notes, reviewing stuff, and trying to get everybody paid. That's a good question though. The other final note that I put on here, and I'm not sure why I stuck it here, but signatures should contain the credentials. That's something that I've come across with a few of my providers lately where they have a signature, but it's not including a credential. So if you type your name next to your signature, because maybe your signature looks nothing like your name, and then you have like LPC typed in afterwards, that's totally fine. But there needs to be a credential near your signature. Any other questions about the billing requirements or invoices or anything else?
Where do you find the, place and service code, the location?
Sure, the question for people who've been here was where do you find the location codes? They're actually outlined in the statutes, or in the Forward Health information. We can definitely send you a copy of those. The ones that we primarily use.
I'll send her a copy.
Amy will send you a copy today, so that you have that. Anybody else need?
Another place too is in the invoice template that we have. Yep. There's a drop down that lists all of the places service codes.
I think they're in the progress note template too.
In the progress
drop
note
down.
template.
Good call. And kind of going on that a little bit too, for a provider who doesn't have, a lot of workers, you probably would want to use our invoice template and progress note template. It's not required, but it'll make your life a little bit easier, I think. But for the agencies who have bigger stuff for their own processes, those invoices are great too. If you're worried that something isn't encompassed or included, feel free to reach out. We definitely take a peek at stuff and look over it and let you know if anything's missing, if we need to rework something. Alright. Any other progress note, invoice, billing, etc. questions? Awesome. Then Bill, would you like to come back up?
Would love to.
We'll keep on the fun.
And also, I mentioned coming to a CCS program near you, which would be our CCS program, Oakland County's CCS program. We're really close to getting a portal in place. And I know that a lot of, like with the St. Croix County, they have a portal, the W has a portal. We're at the point of being ready to start doing some testing. We have right now our invoices, our notes come in a lot of different ways, shapes, and email, faxes, hard copy. But the portal is gonna be in place relatively soon, and so we're gonna be asking probably 5 or so of our providers to kind of do some testing with us before we actually go live. So that's hopefully you'll find helpful, not only from a billing standpoint and getting your invoices and those type of things in, but this training, other aspects of the CCS operation requirements will all be part of the portal that you'll be able to access. So I think you'll find that helpful. Okay, now we're going to come to another audience participation piece of the presentation, and wrapping up. So where are do they have their scenarios? Are you stable?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a recovery plan.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of do, have each of the tables write a sample progress note, collective note based on who's at your table. So in your packets someplace, there should be a participant-specific scenario. And are the scenarios different at each table, or? Okay. Everybody's finding those scenarios? Okay. So what we'd like you to do is to read over the scenario that you have and then write a progress note based on the goal and or the service that you're providing to that particular participant. You can be creative, you can use your collective wisdom at your table to come up with that progress note, and then we'll have somebody from each table be responsible for reporting out, and our QA specialist will be critiquing your progress note and giving you some feedback around that. So start off by reading your scenario, and there'll be a poster board at each table.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Your support is like a big.
You can keep working on yours, and we're gonna go through the scenarios that we have so far, and you'll have time to do that, do your presentation. So, let's go with Deborah's table first. Who's your spokesperson?
I guess I'm the spokesperson.
If you could kind of tell us what your scenario was, and I'm gonna get out of the way, so
Okay, we I'm gonna read this off. For our goal that we charted on was she wants to be more stable, and the objective within that goal was within 6 months, Jane will identify and actively utilize 3 alternative coping skills other than substance use and self-harm to assist in managing her emotions, and will report on the use of these alternative skills when meeting weekly with a therapist. So we're the orange one over here. We have all the gobbledygook stuff up on top here that everyone has to put in there. Like I said, we were charting on the goal. I want to be more stable. In our progress note, we met with Jane. Fred met with Jane at her home. Jane reports struggling with my struggling with my thoughts of cutting. End quote. We have to close the quote. At that time, Fred introduced coping skills of mindfulness techniques and reframing negative thoughts towards self to focus on what is positive about self and our situation. Fred offered examples and practiced them with Jane. So we offered her some scenarios of how she can, what situation she's in, how can she react to that. And then Jane said, this is hard because I'm not used to it. After practicing a couple times, it did get easier. End quote. And then Jane verbally agreed to practice the mindfulness technique once this coming week, and she stated this would make her feel more stable.
So signature on it?
Yep, signature Fred.
Credential?
Yep, LPN. And then it also say the next scheduled visit is next week.
What are you gonna do with the doctor's visit? No, I was supposed to say that.
Are we supposed to say what we're gonna do in the next visit?
There should be an indication of the next plan.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a date, because you're doing a service like psychotherapy, which is always gonna be driven by kind of where they're at that day and what they wanna talk about. If you have a plan, feel free to include it. We are accepting a date as a plan as well.
So that would be the plan, let's see, or next week.
That's really helpful.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thoughts? Relay staff feedback? Feedback from the audience?
I like the mindfulness stuff, that's good.
Do you think we should have, done more detail about the scenarios that were presented to her? Is that necessary?
It'd be a great way to capture the service.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said.
If we would have done more in-depth of what the scenario was that was presented to her.
Yeah.
It's helpful, but.
Cause we didn't say specifically, we said that they were offered and then they worked on them.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're telling us kind of like what the type of scenarios are, or that there is the interaction, you know, anything you offer up is good information, but if we would necessarily ask for more information, we would just kind of accept that the
Unless there was
scenarios are
something
appropriate.
significant that happened within that scenario
Right,
or something like that.
right.
Or if that was the only thing you listed. Like, we worked on things and this was her response to it. But you're saying that you had, 15 minutes, 30 minutes of documentation time and you had 3 sentences.
Right, yeah,
Then there would be
if it was
asking for
a
more.
2-sentence note and the second sentence was that you worked on scenarios, we would want more information about the scenarios just to understand the session more fully.
And my other thing that I asked them about that we were giggling about was our date of birth.
Date of birth.
Our participants have to be able to participate in their recovery, and a few-hour-old baby is not going to be able to.
Our couple-hour baby is going mad. She screams whenever she's hungry.
The only other thing that I didn't see was whether it was an individual service or group service.
Oh, yeah.
There is normally a spot for that across the top, I or G. It doesn't have to be anything, super specific, but I didn't see that there either, but all in all, it's a good note.
Thank you.
All right.
Good job.
Okay, table number 2, which is directly behind the table number 1.
Oh, that's us. So, our team also did, I want to be more stable. Do you want me to read through all this stuff or just our progress note?
Just progress notes.
Okay. So our goal, I want to be more stable. So our note states, this writer had a second face-to-face contact with this participant, Janie, in her home. Janie came to this writer distressed in her current situation, looking for a healthy alternative to cope other than self-harm and substance use. Jane reported, quote, "The journaling has really helped me express my feelings." This writer discussed with Jane the activity of journaling at least 3 times before meeting next. The plan is to meet at Jane's house to discuss journaling and its effectiveness, and that will be on 6/20/19 at 1 p.m. and signed credentials with today's date.
One thing I'm noticing on this note, and I guess also in the other note, is that the mileage is not listed.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it is on
It
that.
is up here at
It
the
is on
top
the
part
first
of
one,
the,
yeah.
remember I asked if you wanted me to read all that?
It is.
This is miles 25.
Travel.
Oh, sorry, I'm listening my I didn't see anything. Did you see anything?
The date of birth is blank, but I know it wasn't
Yeah.
included on the recovery plan.
So what you're saying is it's perfect.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
It looks good.
Do you want me to read some of that?
No.
I can do it now. I wasn't jumping out.
Looks really good.
All right, table number 3, which is at the front of the room in the middle. Thank you.
I did forget to put documentation.
You can add it, you have the marker. No,
We worked on, the first goal, I wanna be more stable. Jane was seen face-to-face meeting, for 1.5 hours with Karen Stanton at her office. She reported she, had followed up on the plan to, actively use self-coping skills by attending a creative arts therapy group in which she, chose art, dance, and singing activities for emotional expression and support. She reported her response was healthy, that she continued these activities at home after the group and found these activities to be cathartic and was able to fall asleep at night. I did not have any cravings or desires to self-harm, end quote. She felt focusing on the art helped her deal with her emotions in a healthy manner and believed that her thoughts were more positive and she was able to deal with triggers and not be distracted. And then continuing at the top, she will continue to engage in these activities, and we'll meet next Tuesday with Karen to talk more about how these activities are going and the use of them with her children and planning for her first visit with them. Long.
Yeah.
Very nice. I got nothing.
Nothing to pick apart with that?
I have nothing to pick apart with that one. Nice job, you guys.
All right, directly behind, table number 3 is table number 4.
Just since you know what you're talking about.
I did. I'll do it. Someone else.
Sorry. Like so. Okay, so we also did the first one. I want to be more stable. We identified objectives. Jane will identify and utilize 3 alternative coping skills. So, for example, we wrote, met Jane at her home. Her mother, Lisa, was also with us there. Jane and I painted and talked more about healthy coping skills. Jane said this is really peaceful and helpful. We will be meeting again on 6/21 at her home to discuss and practice further coping skills. And I think we got all the credentials there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example because it's not, in our template like the other ones have been. It has the sections down at the bottom. This could be a provider template that's a little different, but it still has all the pieces there, so we don't mind, having to look a little differently at the pieces. Yeah, I think everything's
looks
there.
good.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to Jane. Good job, guys.
All right, table number 5 in front of the room. Spokesperson, please.
Don't everyone volunteer at once.
So we did the first goal as well. I want to be more stable. We have all our specifications in here: travel, miles. Let's see, we did individual. We wrote, this worker arrived at Jane's home for our appointment. The purpose of today's appointment was to address the goal of, I want to be more stable by dating, client, and integrating coping skills into, oh gosh, hold on, lost. Jane's current routine. Jane reports feeling overwhelmed, or quote, overwhelmed by her daily tasks, close quote. This worker provided Jane with a daily planner to keep her organized, sorry, here we go, okay, and help manage her anxiety. This worker assisted Jane in learning how to utilize her planner and look at it daily to improve coping with added responsibilities. We did a plan moving forward. Jane will look at her planner each morning to quote, help with not forgetting my appointment. Next date of service was 6/19 at 12 p.m. Location at Jane's home, and purpose will continue to work on coping skills. And this is this here. So.
Beautiful signature.
One thing you'll notice with our templates is that the type for staff type will be the MA. So CSW, since it's a certificate, you could have a master's degree and be a CSW, so it really wouldn't be the type. The type is going to line up with the MA code, like this person has a bachelor's degree, which so we could kind of surmise that from that section above. And so it'll line up with HN, the bachelor's degree, the MA signifier, and it'll match up with the rate that we've established with the provider for bachelor's. We won't have a rate for CSW. So that's where the staff type is kind of different than credentials. And it's super clear when you look at our template for the invoice or our template for the progress notes. So it'll kind of show you the difference. But that's kind of the purpose of staff type versus credentials.
I have a question in regards to like, so say you have, multiple employees. Is it appropriate to put worker, like the worker, that's okay to put that without having a name?
It's assumed that it's the person that is being billed for.
The wrote the note. Okay.
You could write it first person. I don't think that's very common in progress notes of this nature, but we're not gonna tell you can't. I mean, we're not gonna send a note back to say you have to write about this in third person instead, or second person.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yep.
If there were multiple staff, then we would obviously want to have each staff identified. We do have notes that do include multiple staff sometimes.
So it's okay to refer to yourself as like therapist then or something like that, or this writer?
Yeah, as long as it's just clear who's doing the services, who's receiving, that kind of stuff.
You could use your name too, Adam, if you wanted to say Adam did blah blah blah. Adam and Jane talked about.
Body experience. For yourself.
I have a question, can you eliminate that altogether and say just like start note met with Jane at Jane's home?
Absolutely.
Okay, instead of adding more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever flows easiest when you're writing.
If you like writing this worker, feel free,
Wow.
but totally not required.
All right, table number 6, last but not least. And here's the spokesperson.
We did goal number 2, I want to build healthy relationships with others. We were actually missing all of this information at one point, but we snuck it in here. We're missing attendees.
I didn't tip them off.
Yeah. So we filled in that, and then our note indicates this writer met with Jane at her house in Eau Claire. We reviewed the pro-social activities list that Jane and her social worker created, such as volunteering at the community table and attending church once weekly. Jane was asked for Grandma Betty to go to church with her. Jane was encouraged to connect with other church members, to which she agreed to do. We reviewed the DBT module on interpersonal effectiveness. Jane verbalized her understanding of the concept and participated in a brief role play. Jane stated during the role play, this is bullshit. She felt comfortable using the skills. She stated she feels confident. Plans to meet on Thursday, June 20th at James.
So I'm really glad this table put that in, because it isn't something that we talked about in our presentation. Feel free to include direct quotes, even if it says something that you normally wouldn't put in a note. If it's part of their response and it helps really capture the essence of how they're feeling and what they're saying and their willingness to participate with services, feel free. We're not going to get offended.
Post it in their own words.
Yep. Very nice.
Any critiquing to do of that? No?
Does it have?
More hours of work.
Just, just in a few things, but.
For later.
All right, just some parting comments. Started off with a question. So, when are notes? Okay, not many people. When are notes required? It's a trick question. Always. I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, I'll come back to kind of the importance of telling the story. And, you know, the billable part of it is important because it allows you to, you know, and I think we historically, maybe didn't give out the clearest direction around that. Really, if it's a billable activity, you're certainly gonna document it, you're gonna write a note, but I mean also non-billable activity. So you go to a participant's house and you're gonna have a scheduled appointment, and that participant's not there. Please do a note that reflects what that was, because if that's not there, you know, then you compare what's on the recovery plan and the frequency of intervention to what's actually happening. It's not clear. So it's really important to tell the story.
You're not reimbursed for that time though.
You're not reimbursed for that time.
Just
right. Yeah.
It's clear.
And obviously you want to do things that you're reimbursed for. I mean, that's
What about the travel time? If you're going to that person's house and they're not there?
Well, you know, your travel costs are billed. I mean, your mileage expenses are paid for by your particular agency and that kind of stuff. We're not paying. I mean, it's you might.
One of the requirements in order to have travel be a billable service is that a direct service is also provided. And they will not pay for travel without a service. So unfortunately, in one of those situations, the travel to get to that location would not be considered billable.
We've even had a situation before where they were able to meet with the participant, but they didn't have enough time. They were only able to have 5 minutes with the participant, so it wasn't a full unit, and then we weren't able to pay the travel. It's just because that's the MA standards. There needs to be billable service time, at least 1 unit of service time, and then we can pay for the travel involved with the session. It's just out of our hands. It's the MA requirements. That's why the rates build in some of these non-billable instances regarding some of the outside documentation.
No-shows and those type of things that are built into your ongoing rate.
Right. I do want to add that there are situations if you go to somebody's house and they're there and they're just telling you that they're not going to meet with you. If you can have some interaction with them about not wanting to meet with you, that combined with documentation time can be a billed service if you have enough of it. If you're only meeting or communicating with them for 2 minutes, like, hey Bill, would you like to meet today? No, go away.
Hell no.
Okay, that's not gonna be enough. But if I'm making attempts, Bill, we have these goals that we need to work on, how are you feeling today? Like trying to engage in those services, and I can have enough contact with him to create a note to have a billable service, then you can complete your travel billing as well.
Not that you have to have a say anything moment with the boombox.
That won't count.
If you're stepping through the door and not face to face.
That's a really good question, Jeannie. I don't know if that's happened yet that I have. No.
What was the question?
If it's through the door. So Bill's telling me through the door that he doesn't want to meet with me today. Hell no, get out of here. That's a question. And I don't know that we've had that happen.
If it's a screen door and it's
No,
face to
I-
face.
As long as there's a window on that door. You can see their face.
Screen or a window, then yes, if there's no screen or it's
You can see them.
What if it's through a webcam? Like they're, whatever they're.
For sure, if you have situations that come up like that and you try to engage in services, let us know. We can definitely talk about it more specifically as those situations. That's a great question.
So say for example, you're going to the participant's house on your regular schedule and things that are happening, like there's some drama going on or whatever. And you get there and this person is getting loaded up into an EMS. And you still see the person, you're doing some things with that person for, say, 15 minutes. It's not really on track with what's going on, other than helping this person get to where they need to go. And get their items.
Has that happened to you?
So, it's, yeah, so I mean, the only thing for me is like, okay, part of it was about like time management and preparation in this emergency. And giving information to the EMS person. That I was asked to in front of, you know, so.
My question.
Did you bill us for that?
Bill, I'm asking for help. It's
And
on my bill, it's on my to bill.
Oh, it's on the to bill list.
It's on my to bill.
Okay.
But, you know, I drove there, I set up for the EMS, but I didn't include that. I just included the face-to-face time when I was there, which was 15 minutes.
I mean, it's a barrier to services. It'd be almost, you know, similar to if the participant just refused to take part in a service. You're there for the participant, you're supporting them. It's gonna be a case by case basis that we're gonna look at these, and we'll probably talk to the facilitator as well to make sure that you're on the same page for that kind of
I'd go ahead and support that.
But yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't
The
be.
facilitator's been informed and knows of it, was kind of like interesting timing about all of it, but yeah. So.
Check it out.
Okay.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
What I mean?
It's a good one, isn't it?
I'm excited.
It's a good
There's
one.
some good stuff
I
in
was
it.
like, only in my world.
That's a good question, Doug.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing I would mention is, you know, I mean, the work that you all do is really, really important and valuable, and it supports the, you know, participants that we are working with, get them to a place that, you know, hopefully helps them meet their recovery goals, helps them, you know, have improved life satisfaction, helps them reach an optimal level of functioning. So, you know, that face-to-face contact that you have with participants, the documentation regarding that, it all supports the complete operation. And it allows, you know, the CCS program to exist. It allows that you know, folks as providers to be able to build the services of the program that you're doing so that you can support your operations. At the end of the day, you know, this is really a win-win-win scenario that hasn't existed, you know, across the lifespan of my career. That, you know, participants are getting paid at the frequency and intensity that they need. Providers are getting paid as close to, if not, the actual cost of doing business compared to, you know, capitated medical assistance rates, you know, and the department is able to get reimbursed for maybe not 100%, but pretty close to 100% of the work that we do. It really supports, you know, the work that everybody is doing. So it's, you know, it's really, really important stuff. And, you know, that documentation piece is huge. Are there any questions before we sort of wrap up? Anything that we've left on the table that you're curious about, or yeah?
There's another, progress note, I believe, training next month. Oh, it's advanced, is there another progress note?
It's the CCS 101 follow-up, right? That's coming
Don't you
up.
have a
It's in
201?
September.
201 is September.
Yeah, 201.
But progress note training also is in December, just this training is in December.
Is there something in July that's, oh, sorry. My
That's okay.
apologies.
Apology accepted. You all have, I think, pink pieces of paper that is,
I thought you guys were still talking about progress, say a little bit of a different scenario. question. We work in detox. We got a 3 to 5 day window of patient.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get them set up with CCS when we know that they need it. And what we keep on finding is the time that we can give them to set up with stuff, because we know CCS might be their only option. That they're relapsing, and finally we got one person into our residential program, but he had to go through 5 relapse days to get there, because they're so unpredictable, they're not answering their phones and blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to figure, it's a conundrum that I don't know what an answer would be to expedite that process, but we're a little bit unique because we have such a short period of time. And I don't know what the dialogue would be on that.
Well, I think that, as everybody knows, demand for this service is intense. And, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the county, kudos to the county for trying to keep up with the, creating the capacity to address the demand. Even despite that, we're still not able, the end goal would be to be able to serve people upon that demand for that service. We don't want people to suffer. And we realize that we have people coming to us in different shapes and conditions and that type of stuff. We don't have the ability to bring everybody in right at that critical moment. We'll take into consideration, we can talk about it and about that particular scenario. And
yeah, and we do, and your organization has done well in areas where we've gotten them in and they've returned, but the CCS got there.
Yeah.
The application, but then you also have that access with Eau Claire, which gives them time, if they have to send them to sojourners, they can get you. That's our problem.
I don't know that we have a solution.
I've ran it through my head and I go, I don't think that I can really ask for more than what is already being served.
I think, we brought, as evidenced by some of the people at the table from our staff here. We've brought in new staff that are allowing us to address some of those capacity kind of things. That number of people waiting is fluid. We're gonna keep trying to tackle that as best we can to get people in as quick as they can. We do have a behavioral health clinic here with therapists that are both licensed as professional counselors or licensed clinical social workers, as well as certified substance abuse counselors. So there is an opportunity to get individuals in to the behavioral health clinic if we're not able to. It'd be nice to be able to strike while the iron is hot, someone to be able to go in from detox and to go right into treatment. Someone in detox and saying, I'm ready isn't always the best marker, but it is a marker. So we're just gonna keep trying to address that.
I don't know how to get over that. That is a barrier, but I think that we do well enough, and it's just something I don't know how to create something that would be better for that.
Yeah.
If I come up with something, I'll let you know.
All right, I'm there. So fill out your training evaluation forms. This does count. So if you are, let's say, brand new to provide as a CCS provider, you all know that you have training requirements that have to be completed within the first 3 months of coming online as a CCS provider, 6 months or more of social rehabilitation experience. It's 20 hours, less than 6 months, it's 40 hours, so this participation today counts towards that. Ongoing basis, it's 8 hours on an annual basis, so take credit for the time that you spent with us, and thanks for being with us.